There is someone you might know or someone you've observed who seems completely unconcerned about whether people respect them. They don't perform for approval. They don't try to impress. They don't seem to need validation. They walk into a room and people somehow give them respect that they didn't ask for and don't seem to care about receiving. Meanwhile, you watch someone else, someone who is desperately trying to be respected, who is constantly demonstrating their value, who is always highlighting their accomplishments and their capabilities. And what happens? People give them contempt. They see the desperation, they sense the need, and respect which should flow towards someone displaying value somehow flows away instead. So why is it that the person who seems least interested in being respected is the one who gets respected, while the person who most desperately wants respect is the one who gets dismissed? The answer lives in a psychological principle so fundamental that once you see it, you'll see it operating everywhere, in every human interaction, in every social dynamic, in every relationship structure. Respect flows toward what seems valuable, and value is determined not by what someone has or what they can do, but by how much they seem to need from others. A person who seems like they don't need your respect is perceived as valuable. A person who needs your respect is perceived as desperate. And desperation, no matter how well disguised, repels respect. This is the dark psychology of value. The harder you chase respect, the less you get it, and the less you seem to care about it, the more you accumulate it. You cannot force others to respect you by doing things that broadcast your need for their respect. You can only make them respect you by becoming someone who doesn't seem to need it. Let's be clear about what's actually happening psychologically when you desperately want someone's respect. Your nervous system is communicating something very specific. It's saying, your approval determines my value, and I need your approval to feel okay about myself. This message is visible in how you present yourself, in the energy you bring to interactions, in the way you lean slightly toward the person's approval. It's subtle, but it's visible. And what every human being on some level hears when they perceive this person has lower status than me. They're looking up at me for approval. They're dependent on my perception of them. And once someone perceives you as dependent on their approval, respect is off the table. What you get instead is the power to manipulate someone who will do things for your validation. This is one of the cruelest mechanisms in human social dynamics. The person who most desperately wants respect is usually the person least likely to get it. Not because they don't deserve it, not because they're incapable, but because the desperation itself is perceived as a status marker. It signals that you don't have enough internal certainty to survive without external validation. It signals that you're available to be managed by anyone who can offer approval. And people don't respect people they can manipulate with approval. They only respect people who seem like they could take it or leave it. Think about what this means in practical terms. There's a person at work who is constantly trying to prove their value, constantly highlighting their accomplishments, constantly seeking validation from higher ups. They're trying to force respect through demonstrated competence and visible contribution. And what happens? They're seen as trying too hard. They're seen as insecure. They're seen as someone who is performing for approval. Meanwhile, someone else is quietly doing good work, not constantly announcing it, not constantly seeking credit or validation, just doing what they do and moving on. And over time, that person somehow ends up with more respect, more advancement, more genuine admiration. The difference is not in the quality of work. The difference is in how much each person's need for validation is visible. Here's where it gets even more psychological. Because this principle extends to something far more fundamental than professional respect. It extends to all forms of human value, including romantic attraction. Watch what happens when someone desperately wants to be found attractive. They might dress to attract attention. They might try to be impressive. They might constantly seek validation about their appearance or their worthiness as a romantic partner. And what they communicate through this desperation is vulnerability to manipulation. Someone who is desperate to be found attractive is available to be controlled by anyone who offers that validation. They're not equal in the dynamic. They need something from the other person more than they can afford to. And people don't experience attraction to people who seem to need them desperately for validation. They experience attraction to people who seem fine without them. This is why the person who seems most confident, most comfortable with themselves, most unconcerned about whether someone else finds them attractive is often the most attractive. Not because confidence makes them objectively more appealing, but because confidence communicates independence. It communicates that they have internal validation. It communicates that they could take it or leave it. And that sense of independence, that sense of not needing what the other person is offering, is paradoxically what makes what the other person is offering most valuable to them. When someone finally gets the approval or attraction or respect from someone who doesn't seem to need it, it feels like a genuine gift. When someone gives approval to someone who desperately needs it, it just feels like manipulation. Now let's talk about the mechanism that makes this work, because understanding the mechanism is what allows you to actually apply this principle rather than just intellectually understanding it. When a person seems like they don't need your respect, your brain automatically assigns them higher status. Status in human social hierarchies is partially about accomplishment and capability, but it's significantly about independence. A high-status person is someone who could survive and thrive without the approval of any particular other person. A low-status person is someone who depends on others' approval to feel okay about themselves. This is a fundamental human perception, and it operates below the conscious level. You might not rationally believe that someone's status is determined by whether they need your approval, but your brain registers it anyway. This also means that perceived value is about scarcity, and you create scarcity of your respect not by withholding it as a tactic, but by genuinely not needing others' respect. When your self-respect is internal, when you have decided on your own value, and you're not asking others to confirm that value for you, you become rare. You become something that others cannot control or manipulate. You become valuable precisely because you're not available to be purchased with approval or validation. The person who gives their respect easily to anyone who asks for it is common. Their respect is cheap. The person who seems to give their respect only to people who have genuinely earned it, and who doesn't seem to care whether you have their respect or not, their respect is valuable. When they finally show you respect, it means something. Let's look at how this actually manifests in specific relationship structures. In parent-child relationships, the child respects the parent far more when the parent doesn't seem desperately attached to being loved or respected by the child. A parent who is secure enough to set boundaries, to enforce consequences, to say no without apologizing or needing the child to understand why, commands far more respect than a parent who is constantly trying to be liked by their child, constantly seeking the child's approval of their parenting, constantly adjusting what they do based on whether the child respects them for it. The child senses the difference. The parent who doesn't need the child's respect has status. The parent who desperately needs it has vulnerability. In friendships, the person who seems most willing to walk away, most comfortable being alone, least desperate for the friendship to work, is often the person who has the most loyal and respectful friendships. This is because their friends have to earn their time and their presence. The friend who is always available, always trying to maintain the friendship, always seeking validation that the friendship matters, is perceived as low status. The friend who is comfortable with solitude, who includes people when it feels right, who doesn't need constant confirmation that they're valued, is perceived as having integrity and worth. Here's something critical to understand about the application of this principle. You cannot fake not needing respect. The attempt to seem like you don't need respect, while actually desperately needing it, is visible. It's a form of performance, and performance always broadcasts itself. The person who is trying to seem independent while actually being dependent comes across as inauthentic. There's a quality to genuinely not needing something that's different from pretending not to need it. The person who has genuinely developed internal validation, who has decided on their own worth independent of others' opinions, broadcasts that security. The person who is faking it broadcasts the calculation underneath. This means that the actual work of gaining respect is not about developing tactics to seem like you don't need respect. The actual work is developing genuine self-respect so you don't need it. It's about deciding internally that your value is not determined by other people's opinions. It's about building a sense of self that is not contingent on external validation. It's about becoming someone who could be fine alone, someone who is choosing to be in relationships because those relationships add value, not because you need them to confirm your worth. When this shift happens, when you genuinely stop needing others' respect, something almost magical occurs in your social dynamics. People start respecting you, not because you finally earned it through your accomplishments, but because you've stopped signaling that you need it. You've moved from a posture of seeking to a posture of choosing. And people respect choosers. People respect those who seem capable of standing alone. People respect those whose respect is valuable because it's scarce. Now let's talk about what this dark psychology actually means, because calling it dark is important. It means that respect in human systems is not primarily based on merit. It's based on perceived status and independence. It means that someone could be incredibly competent and valuable and still not get respect if they need it too much. It means that someone could be mediocre and still command respect if they seem indifferent to whether they have it. This is not a fair system. This is not how we wish human psychology worked. But it's how it actually works, and understanding this reality is what allows you to navigate it effectively. The dark element is also that once you understand this principle, you could theoretically use it manipulatively. You could cultivate an appearance of not needing respect while actually carefully calculating how to get it. You could perform indifference while secretly managing every aspect of how you're perceived, and this does happen. There are people who are very good at seeming like they don't care about respect while actually orchestrating the entire dynamic to gain it. The difference between this and genuine confidence is that genuine confidence is not a performance. It's a real internal state. The person who has genuinely developed self-respect doesn't need to perform anything because their internal reality matches what they're broadcasting externally. This also connects to something worth understanding about the nature of respect itself. Real respect is not compliance. It's not agreement. It's not following someone because they have power over you. Real respect is voluntary admiration for someone's integrity, capability, or character. And this kind of respect can only flow towards someone who doesn't seem to need it, because the moment someone needs your respect, they have become dependent on you in a way that threatens their integrity. You can't genuinely respect someone who would compromise their values to get your approval. You can only truly respect someone who would be willing to lose your approval rather than compromise who they are. This is why some of the most respected people in any given field are often people who have seemed willing to walk away from the field if it required them to compromise their principles. They're respected not despite their willingness to walk away, but because of it. The willingness to walk away signals that they have alternatives, that they don't desperately need what the field is offering, that they have internal resources and self-respect that doesn't depend on success in this particular arena. And that signal is incredibly respectable. Think about what this means for how you approach the people you want respect from. If you want someone's respect, the strategy is not to try harder, not to demonstrate more value, not to be more impressive. The strategy is to become genuinely okay if you don't get their respect. It's to develop such internal certainty about your own value that their respect becomes a nice thing if it happens, but not something you need. This is counterintuitive because it seems like focusing on not needing respect would mean you don't get it. But the opposite is true. The moment you stop needing it, you start getting it. The closing paradox that should sit with you is profound. The only way to force others to respect you is to genuinely stop caring whether they do. The only way to make your respect valuable is to give it sparingly, to people who have genuinely earned it, and to remain genuinely indifferent about whether they respect you in return. The only way to command presence in a room is to be comfortable being alone. The only way to create powerful relationships is to be willing to lose them if they require you to compromise yourself. So the real question is not how to force others to respect you. The real question is, what would change if you developed such deep internal respect for yourself that you genuinely didn't need others' respect to feel okay? And if you achieved that, how would your relationships actually transform?